Right. Welcome, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed the music a little bit and getting you excited for the next 30 minutes when we talk about migration to the cloud. Awesome stuff. I'll try and be quick. I know you all probably want to get to lunch and things like that, so I'm not going to do a QA, but I'll be at the Denodo booth. If you need anything, come talk to me. We can answer questions there. So, welcome. All right. Migration to the cloud, overcoming challenges. Let me introduce myself first. So, my name is Jeff Nagosic. I'm the Google Cloud Platform Lead, Data and Analytics for Accenture here in the UK. Don't worry, I'm not going to try and sell you anything, I promise. We're going to talk about technical stuff today and deep dive into this. But 12 years with Accenture, 27-year career in IT. I started at NASA. Went to Marriott and Accenture. Interesting journey, but I'm sure you're thinking this question, but yes, NASA was awesome. Best place ever to work. Launched a shuttle every 8 weeks. Can't beat that for a benefit for work. But now we're in new technology, right? So the Google Cloud. Let me thank my partners, Google Cloud, Denodo, and of course the conference, Blueprint. I hope you all are having a fantastic time. They made this possible. So let's go forward. Journey to the cloud. So I'm going to start with a little audience participation because it takes the pressure off me, really. Let's do a quick survey. How many of you all are currently involved in a journey to the cloud and just need hands? Raise them up, people. Come on. There we go. Quite a few. Good. Good. All right. How many of you think it's going well? Wow, that is exactly what I expected to see. Not many, and I, to be fair, it's not the technology. I don't think everything I've done works fine in the cloud. I think we put obstacles in our way, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So, what does a typical journey to cloud look like? I've summed it up into these 4 layers. I think they make sense. Cloud foundations, really building the security and the infrastructure and getting the networking connected and being able to use the cloud. Basic stuff you need to do to use it, right? Then typically a platform migration comes into play and that's what helps drive the adoption into the cloud. Next layer. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, we need to identify value. Where do we get the value from? When do we start making money off this thing that's supposed to be magical? And then lastly is, oh God, we also have multiple clouds. We need to figure out how to connect them and what the purpose of them are for, because we don't want to stick with just one. We like all 3. Okay. So the problem I see is typically around the first 2 layers. They tend to take much longer than expected. Again, not from a technology standpoint, the technology works, but more from obstacles we put in the way. So what I've done is deep dive into each of these layers, if you will, and identified some obstacles. So with the cloud foundations, obstacle to me is generally around security. I know, it's a 4-letter S word to me. Security's perception of risk really slows down the process. Second, there's some confusion about how to migrate correctly to the cloud. Do I go use case by use case, or do I build capabilities? And there doesn't seem to be a clear answer. Next is the value generation. What does IT need versus what the business needs? Both have things that are important to them, but they're not necessarily the same things. And lastly is, how do we, use the information across this cloud? There's no real examples because nobody's made it this far yet, in most cases. So trying to figure out how to do that typically is at the end of the journey. But how can we bring it a little closer rather than take 5 years to get to that point becomes the question. So what I think is, let's start with the security. We'll start at the bottom layer. Security, like I said, they typically get in not in the way, but they throw up a lot of roadblocks that are hard to overcome. And the reason for that is this. Simply, security thinks on-prem is solid and protected, and it's a good vault, if you will, and the cloud is completely vulnerable, and anybody can get to it. So all the gold will pour out of your system, and then everyone will lose their job. Well, I give security a hard time a bit, but the reality is this. When you move to public cloud, it's like having a door inserted into your vault that leads to the outside, and that freaks them out. So how do we work with security to, let's say, move a little faster to progress to the cloud and make cloud migrations a realistic time frame? So we have a couple of recommendations, if you will. We'll start with these. So we engage security immediately. Get them on board, understand what their problems are with adopting the cloud as a component of the overall architecture. Really working with them from the get-go helps understand their perspective rather than waiting till the end. Simplifying the solution. This is key to me. I think one thing we do, and the last speaker, if you all were here for that, talked about it a bit. There's all these new tools and toys and things to play with. If you look around at this conference, it's awesome stuff. But in reality, nobody's used them. They're all new things. And simplifying the solution and focusing on the things you know and the things you do best help move you through the security process. I've seen companies put together solutions that have 20 components to ingest data, and this doesn't make a lot of sense. That's 20 components that security have to dig into and identify vulnerabilities and come up with where controls need to be put in place to prevent data loss, and it just takes endless amounts of time to move forward. So simplify the solution. Also, working left to right to me is key. Instead of presenting security with this big, here's the whole solution from end to end, work left to right. Start with how you're ingesting the data and moving the data into the cloud. If you can secure that, then you can move on to the next bit. It doesn't make any sense to present them end to end where they can then have infinite time to take to dig through it all and identify all the possible combinations of where somebody can infiltrate the cloud. Start simple, work left to right. Be realistic about the data as well. Every client I have says to me the same thing. We need all the data. Got to have it all. Really? Why do you need phone number? What does that do for anybody in a data and analytics platform? I haven't figured it out. Even first name. What do I need that for? It's a little unrealistic. So be realistic with the data you're going to bring into the cloud and what its purpose is. Lastly, security tends to over-secure, if you will, kind of over-engineering, but for security. And I believe in just enough security. So one of the clients I've had, they required everything that was going to be deployed into the cloud go through CI/CD process, regardless of the environment we're talking about, whether it be in dev or test or integration or pre-prod or whatever they are. Everything had to be CI/CD. Even testing had to be CI/CD. Which, if you think about it, the amount of time it takes to do that, to develop scripts, to deploy these things, to develop scripts, to then get back the results of the test, and all of this, all of a sudden your timeline to deliver on the cloud has been tripled. And that's killing everybody's adoption. So, move with security. That will help get you through the foundational phase. Platform migration. So, I hate this slide, by the way, and I did it, but it at least shows a clear checklist of when to use one versus the other. Good, take a picture of it. That's encouraging. I hear a lot of things about lift and shift and move and improve. I don't have it on here, and there's a reason for that, because I think lift and shift is rubbish. I don't believe it actually exists. There's no way on a cloud platform, because you're not coming from a cloud platform, to lift and shift it into this cloud. You're coming from a very different architecture with very different tools and capabilities. Some overlap, but the majority of things, when you're moving to the cloud, now you have networking, security, IAM, all the other things that play into this that you need to account for. So lift and shift to me is garbage. I think you got to focus on the move and improve. And there's a challenge with that in there as well, that every client goes, okay, well, we're going to do this. Now let's do all the things that we didn't get right the first time, and let's layer them in, because now all of a sudden we're magically better at them. So now I want to put in the data governance and load the Calibras of the world, which are good tools. But it takes time to learn how to use them and how to incorporate them into your solutions. Now we need data quality rules and reference data management and all these other things that didn't exist on their initial platform, but now they have to have in the cloud, because again, the cloud is magical. So get that on your mind. What I think really comes down to when you're doing a migration is whether you do use case by use case or you do by capability. And what's the difference? So use case by use case is what I see is somebody takes a use case that works on-prem or that they want to do in the cloud, and they develop that out, end to end. This works for developing a use case. It may work for a handful of use cases, but if you want to migrate at scale, there's no way to do that use case by use case. You have to develop capability driven. So I go with use case driven if you want to identify new value, maybe test out a new pattern, maybe learn something new, but you can't move at scale. My current client says we have 300 use cases we need to move by the end of next year. Okay, how many are we going to get done this year? 3. I don't think we're hitting the 300 next year. It's just not going to happen at that pace. So migrate at scale is capability driven. So what does that mean? You build the capabilities for the majority of your use cases that support them on their journey. And what I call this is the McDonald's Method, or Five Guys, whichever your favorite burger is. So McDonald's came up with this thing called the Speedy system, 1950s. Awesome stuff. Essentially what it says is each area, each capability, if you will, has an input, output, and they move from one to the other. And that's their job. Very simple. So, same thing here. We have an ingestion. Ingestion's job is to bring in the data. That's what it does. You do it for all the different kinds of formats and various structures that need to be brought in or connected to, and focus on that. Build that capability up. And then you can start to progress your use cases through this process. So, example, if we have 100 use cases, maybe they built the capability to do 50 of them as an initial, release 1. You start to move the use cases through that. Then your standardization phase, it's adding in the transformation of the format, the cleansing, the data protection, all these things, and you start to move the rest of the use cases through that apply. Your curation layer, same way. You put the calculations in place that build the curation layer and apply those to the next set of use cases. And you take mass, from stage to stage to get through this process. And then eventually you consume the data. And you mature your capabilities over time to add that next backlog of requirements that are needed to solve that next, the use cases that are parked. So this is a much better way to move through a massive cloud migration than going use case by use case. You'll be stuck there forever that other way. Okay, platform migration. Now, one sec. Value generation. I'm going to start with the obvious here, I think. Business needs versus IT vision. These two things rarely align. At least in my perspective, I've never seen them line up. They have two different goals, you're getting pulled two different ways, and you don't know which way to go. Why is this? The business want value now. how can I get value out of this migration to the cloud right now? I want to play with all those tools. I want to connect what I have to it. I want to get access to all the data. And I want to be versatile. I want to create all these different little cars, if you will, from this cloud migration. And I want to be able to do that right now. And I need the ability to change and adapt because my business changes. Okay, fine, makes sense. What IT wants, right? Okay, we got to be able to handle all of a sudden the 500 different people that are going to start using this platform and the various requirements that they have, and we got to make it consistent and manageable and maintainable and repeatable. So what they want to build is the factory, or the platform, if you will, that builds the cars. And these two things, at the end of the day, just don't add up. So the question becomes, how can we do these two things at the same time? Well, first what we have to do is sort of rethink the game. Instead of a serialized progression through your journey to cloud, divide it up. Do these two things in parallel. So your IT world can focus on what's important to them, which is building a platform that can scale and support the many different customers and various use cases and give people access to tools and make sure that it's secure along the way and protecting everybody, while the business starts to use the data and starts to generate value from the data and the tools that the cloud has to offer. So the question becomes, how do we do this? How do we split this two up and let them work at the same time? And the answer is data. Got to have access to data. Right? Without data, none of this really means anything. So there are three ways to get data at the end of the day. People will tell you CDC or stream this, stream that, blah, blah, blah. Three ways: batch it, stream it, or virtualize it. Right? What we're going to talk about is data virtualization, because batching and streaming is essentially part of the cloud platform foundations that move data in, but the business is often sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting for all the different systems to be connected up and be made available for their use. But virtualization, it sort of bypasses that, if you will. I took this statistic from Gartner to be somewhat data-driven. 60% of organizations will implement data virtualization by next year. Why is that? Because they're all running into the same problem I just talked about. No one can get data fast enough. Nobody can use the platform fast enough. They're all waiting for that beautiful IT-built platform to be made available, and it's just not going as fast as they would like. So data virtualization helps solve this problem. How does it work? Well, it essentially puts a layer in between the sources and provides access to the business. The layer connects to all the data sources and abstracts all of that away from the users. It then creates the ability to combine the data and transform it to meet the needs of the business. And then it enables it to be consumed by all the business products that they're currently using. So you're not really having to learn anything new here. What it also does is creates the data fabric. Data fabric is the new thing, right? But the foundation of data fabric is having federated data. And in order to connect everybody with it, you have to put a data virtualization layer in place to enable the use of the data from all those different systems. The business can then also sit and define how their data fabric works and the elements of it and the model itself. And they can begin to put that piece together using a virtualization layer. Now, some of the key components of virtualization are, we're not moving data the way you are in a batch and streaming mechanism. That's actually taking data out of a source, putting it in some transfer mechanism, sending it into the cloud, landing it, processing it. All of that's cut out. So how does it work? If I'm not moving data, how do I get it? Well, it works by simplifying the data. So it's more of go get me the data I need when I need it. So an example of this, I think, is, I have plenty of things in my house. I have cereal, I have milk, I have all these things, but I don't have cardamom because I don't need it yet. But when I do need it, I go to the store that sells it and I bring it home. And then I use it for what I need it for, and then I'm done. I don't need to store everything all in one place. And this allows me to venture out and go get what I need when I need it. So the self-service aspect of it allows customers the freedom to interact with all these systems without having to go through a middle layer. Security is all in place to protect everyone and make sure that your row-level security is being pushed down to the systems, and people that need to see what they can't see or what they can't see is limited. It can connect all the clouds together for them. So they really start to do that value generation piece, right? They're starting to feed data into their models, and all of a sudden they're getting the ROI and value out of the process that they've been waiting for IT to produce. So all of a sudden, they can produce dashboards quickly, they have access to all the data they need, and they're creating models, and everybody's, what's the saying? Bob's your uncle, happy as Larry. I don't know who Larry is, but he's happy, and probably because he uses Denodo, I would assume. But that's the idea behind virtualization. Now, how does it help progress the migration to the cloud? Well, did that work? There we go. It does two things, right? One, it progresses migration to the cloud by getting the business off of the back of IT that's constantly putting pressure on them to move faster and faster, where then they start to cut corners and all of a sudden their systems aren't working exactly as ideally as they expected. And it allows them to refocus on the task at hand, which is building the perfect platform out. It actually increases the speed of migration to the cloud for platforms. And this is because the business is using the data. They can actually connect to all the systems. They know what data they actually need to sit in the cloud and what they don't. In a pure migration, the IT is just expecting to lift and move everything over into the cloud. But using the virtualization tool, they can really identify, there's 20, 30% of data we don't need to move. And all of a sudden their timelines have been decreased. We had an example in Accenture that went from 2 years to 12 months in order to move data from one platform to another by using virtualization. Second thing is it's also creating the data fabric, right? The business is able to put the data fabric together and start to build that layer, if you will, while IT is moving data into the cloud and moving processes. So it gives them that end target, which then they have to build the middle in between. So platform migration all of a sudden becomes increased, thus making the move to cloud much, much faster. Again, we talked about value generation. Now all of a sudden the business has access to the data they need. They can start to build models. They can start to put together statistics and analyze the data that before they'd have to wait for years to get. Even new data. All of a sudden you can add a new system into the virtualization tool and you're up and running. No need to wait. So the value generation is there, and all of a sudden the business is happy and IT is happy. And then at the same time we still have the challenge of the multi-clouds. Now the business can start to connect the data between them and start to understand, this is how we're using the data between the multi-cloud or different clouds and how we need to move it between each other, and start to create that blueprint for how multi-cloud integration works. Now, closing, because I'm running out of time. So simplify it, right? These are the 4 ways to move faster. Simplify your designs. Don't try and do everything. Don't eat the elephant whole, as my mother would say. Do vertical development. So define what the focus area of the capability is, what its input is, what its output is, and keep it locked into there. Don't try and do everything all over the place. Divide up your value generation into 2 streams. One for IT, one for the business. Parallel value generation. And in order to do that, virtualize the data. That's it. All right, good. Well, if you have any questions, let me know. But I think that's the end. So you can enjoy lunch now. All right, thank you.